Welcome along, guys. We're out on another KTM Enduro, but it's not just any KTM Enduro. This is the latest in two-stroke technology. This is the KTM 250 EXC TPI. I've had this bike for about 3 weeks now, so I'm really starting to gel with it now. I've had the 500 EXC, as you know, which I absolutely love the 500. The 500 was a 4-stroke. This is a 250 2-stroke, so half the capacity, but obviously a 2-stroke makes more power. Now I'm going to go into a bit about 2-stroke engines and what they've done with this TPI, which is so special. But basically this is a fuel injection. This is transfer port injection. This is what the TPI stands for. But more on that in a minute. So what's this bike like? And also, what is it like compared to the 500? The 500 is more powerful. The 500 is more torquey. Look at this, getting mucky already. This is lighter. This is about 4 or 5 kilos lighter than the 500. It's all about power delivery with the 2 strokes. They've still got a reasonable amount of torque. I mean, they're not tuned just for top end. Now these are tuned to be usable throughout the whole rev range, but of course they do have that mental top end. I've ridden the old 250 carbureted version. I used to have a 200 2-stroke, and I can tell you, I can't tell the difference really. I cannot tell the difference between this injected 2-stroke and the carb 2-stroke. They've spent 10 years developing this bike to get it right, and I can't tell the difference. It's that good. So what advantages does this whole TPI fuel injection give you, apart from your bike being able to go through meet Euro 4 emissions? There's some real big advantages. A big one is it's no longer pre-mixed. You can just put normal pump fuel into this without having to pre-mix your oil. The oil is taken care of via the oil pump and it's pumped into the engine. It also means you can go through elevation changes, temperature changes, without having to reject the bike. Because it's fuel injected, because it's got all the sensors on the bike for air temperature, air pressure, it adjusts the amount of fuel it needs automatically. That's the whole beauty of fuel injection. The oil consumption of this bike is something like 80 to 1 that the oil runs out on this. 80 to 1, whereas normally you'd go sort of 30, 40 to 1 on your oil fuel mixture. So you're really all using half the amount of oil that you used to with a carb bike. Whoa, which way? We'll go straight on. Wheelies are tricky on a 2-stroke because you don't have any engine braking though. So you're wheeling it, you've got to really be careful on the back brake. It's much harder to wheelie than the 4-stroke, if you're into that sort of thing, of course. I'm not. Also on the overrun, normally with the carbed, when you close the throttle, the bike's not getting any oil because it's not getting any petrol. So if you're running downhill with the throttle closed, you can potentially do damage, and you have to sort of rev it, give it some petrol to lubricate the oil around the engine. Not so with this, because the oil is still being injected while the throttle is closed. Lovely. Oh, which way? Let's go this way. So these little lanes like this, these Enduros are brilliant on. Because the other big advantages between the 2-stroke and the 4-stroke, I mentioned on my 500 video that you know, the service intervals on the 500 or every 17 hours of use. So when your little, say odometer, put your little hourometer tells you that you've been running the bike for 17 hours continuously, not all in one go, but spread over however many weeks or months that takes, you have to change the oil, you have to check the valve clearances. I mean, okay, that may only take you might be able to crack that out and do it in an hour, hour and a half, if you know what you're doing. But it's still a lot of maintenance to be doing, and the oil costs aren't cheap either. Whereas with the two-stroke, hello madam, with the two-stroke, these things don't really need oil changes. You have gear oil, which you might have to change once a season. Probably can leave it in there longer. That's it, they're such a simple design, there's really not much to do to them. You need to obviously think about piston. I mean, the biggest thing that wear on these is the piston rings wears. So I think it's something like every 100 hours, according to the service schedule, you're meant to change the piston and rings. That sounds like, oh my god, piston and rings, don't want none of that. It's not that complicated because these are so simple. The cost of the piston is about 130 quid. With the rings, it's not a great deal of expense, and that is also based on if the bike's being used for competition. My 200, I think, had about 180 hours on it, and it was absolutely fine. So that 100 hours is sort of worst case scenario. Better do this one in 50. Horses hate two-strokes. They don't. It's a noise they're just not accustomed to at all. Let's see if this one's going to let me pass without crapping its pants. Yeah, they're beautiful. The sound of two-strokes. Do they sound great or what? Yeah, it's slippery. It's slippery. Hang on, let me pull over here and I'll just give you a very quick little lesson in two-stroke engine design. So, two-stroke engines, very simple. A very simple engine compared to a four-stroke engine. You got an exhaust. I'll tell you what, let's cut to the garage. Okay, Lambchop's school time. So, two-stroke engine. Ignore my very crude drawing. So, barrel, piston in there, cob rod. That is your basic two-stroke engine. Your fuel comes in here, okay, it then goes into the crank of the engine. So your fuel is in the crank, your piston goes up and actually sucks this mixture into the crank. The piston fires the previous cycle of fuel air in the cylinder, goes bang, goes out the exhaust. The piston then comes down, it compresses the mixture which is in the crank, which then goes up the transport port into the cylinder. The piston comes up, ignites, bang, mixture goes out to exhaust. Your fuel and oil is mixed, or in the example of the Enduro bike, it's pre-mixed in the tank. So you've got the fuel tank up here with your fuel oil mix in it, which then goes into what would be a carb, which then goes into the crank, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's a regular two-stroke engine. With the TPI fuel injection, what they have done is they've added some fuel injectors to the side of the engine, one either side here. The fuel feed comes from the separate oil tank, which comes into the throttle body here. So the oil and air are in the throttle body. So you're only getting oil and air into the crank. Now this is why with this engine it doesn't use as much oil, because you've not got your oil mixed with your fuel yet. So you've not got a lot of oil lost and washed away with the fuel. So it's just oil and air which is lubricating your crank and piston. So that's one reason why it uses less oil. It's not that they're running it leaner, it's just because the oil is mixed with air and not fuel. So you don't need as much of it to do the lubrication. So as this compresses, this oil and air comes up the transfer port, where the fuel is added. This is where the fuel injection is added, either side of the engine, directly into the transfer port. So when it goes into the engine, the air, the oil and the fuel is then all mixed, ignited in the barrel, bang, there's your cycle. And that's just how they've managed to meet emissions, because they can control very closely how much fuel is added in the barrel. So you're not wasting a lot of fuel, you're not wasting a lot of oil. There's obviously some oil and fuel still unburnt and goes out the exhaust, but it's greatly reduced compared to an old-fashioned two-stroke engine. That's it, lesson over. So your oil goes in here, in the frame. That is actually within the frame, that oil tank, and you can see the very bottom of the oil tank sitting out at the bottom here. So that you can visibly see the oil. You also have an oil warning light on the dash as well when you're getting low. It's around about 5 tanks of petrol to every 1 tank of oil. So that is quite a few miles on this, considering this thing is way better on petrol than an old-fashioned two-stroke because it's more tightly controlled with the fuel injection. So, you know, all the downsides of two-strokes with the smoke, the dirt, the added fuel consumption, the pre-mixing, those are all out of the equation now. So it makes it even more difficult to choose between a two-stroke or a four-stroke. It's got a lithium battery, this, to keep weight down. All of the Enduro range now have lithium batteries on them. I think it's about 103 kilos, something like that. Don't you roll off the stand, young man. You know, you can tell there's not a great deal of oil coming out of it when you're revving it. Not like an old-fashioned two-stroke. Oh, I like them. I like them a lot. It flies, it flies! This is so good, this little 250. It's a brilliant size bike, a 250. And I think if you were going off-road on this and doing a load of off-road stuff, I think this could be the perfect size bike. But I'm going to be borrowing the 300 two-stroke soon, after Christmas. I can't wait to see how that extra bit of oomph from the 300, what difference that makes. I may have to buy one. Yeah. There we go, guys. I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed my quick overview of this 250 TPI. It's a great little machine, and I'm so pleased the two-stroke is here. Whether it will stay with us, whether it can make the Euro 5, Euro 6 is another matter. I think they have to go to direct port injection to be able to try and get this thing to meet those sort of tight, stringent controls. But it's here, it's fantastic. Go buy one while you can.